Wow. Look at this. Just look at this. Today we're going to make steak and eggs, but with a twist. Just look at that. Okay, let's begin. Today I'm using a piece of filet. I've tied it up with some twine, and I've removed all of the silver skin. I also have a bouquet garni with some herbs, egg, truffle, salad, and vinaigrette. Fairly simple. So the first step is to season our steak. The best way to do this is over the sink and to sprinkle the salt from above. This will spread and cover the entire steak. This may look like a lot of salt, but this is just the right amount for a steak like this. If we don't salt the steak, it will tend to boil in the pan rather than roast. There's a lot of excess water that will come out. The salt will help with this. Next, we're going to portion some herb butter. This is a fairly simple recipe. I have another video on my channel if you wish to view it. So now we're just going to remove the plastic and set it aside for later. We're going to start cooking our steak. In a nice big heavy pan, we need it fairly hot. Add some neutral oil. I'm using sunflower oil today. We're going to put our steak in. So when you begin, you want your pan slightly hotter than what you need for cooking your steak. Because when you put your steak in the pan, it's going to cool it down. And this is important because if your pan is not hot enough, your steak is not going to roast. It's going to boil. And this will definitely change the flavor. Golden rule when cooking a steak is color is flavor. Think about that. If you're cooking a steak and it's fully cooked and it's gray, it's not going to taste very good. But if you cook it properly, baste it, and it's golden brown, that's going to be a pretty good steak. Finished searing our steak, and I've added some butter to the pan. We're going to start basting here. Butter is going to keep our steak juicy, and it's going to help color the steak as well. So another thing to think about when you're basting with butter is to keep an eye on the color of it. Brown butter is just fine. That's actually a good thing. That's what we want. If it gets any darker and you start to see black specks, say the butter is not foaming up anymore like it is right now, that means your butter is close to being burned, or it is burned, and that's definitely a bad thing. So if you start to see your butter getting a bit too dark, the best way to fix this is to take a couple of cubes of fresh butter and then just add them to the pan. Another thing to remember while basting is to baste away from you. This is very hot butter, and it is easy to burn yourself if you're not careful. So my butter is getting a little bit darker than I'd like, so I'm adding a tiny bit more fresh butter. And when you're basting, you want your butter to be nice and foamy like this. So I'm now going to add my bouquet garni of herbs. I have some thyme, rosemary, bay leaf, some parsley stems. It's all wrapped up in there. And I'm adding it now, towards the end, because if I added it sooner, the herbs would just burn. Adding it towards the end, you'll keep the flavor of the herbs. Now is around the time you want to start checking your steak. There's a couple ways to do this. A lot of chefs, they just tap the steak, and that gives you a pretty good idea of how well done it is. But the best method is to take a skewer and insert it into the center of the steak for a couple of seconds, just like that, and then test it on your wrist, because it's a sensitive area, and if your steak is cold, it's still raw in the center. What you want is it to be slightly warm, so that will be a nice medium rare. So our steak is pretty much cooked, but we're not ready to serve yet. The most important part is resting the steak. So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take some of that brown butter from the pan, pour it on top just to keep things moist, and we're going to wrap the steak in butter paper for about 10 to 15 minutes. It's tempting to just cut into it right now, but if you do that, you're going to ruin it. All the juice will come out, and it will be dry, and just not a good steak anymore. Now we're just going to wrap our steak in this butter paper. It'll keep things nice and juicy until we're ready to serve. If you don't have any butter paper, aluminum foil works just fine. We're just going to wrap that and leave it aside until we've finished the rest. So while our steak is resting, we're going to cook our egg. So get a Teflon pan, tiny bit of oil, medium heat. We're going to cover with a plate. So this has been about a minute. So we can just serve the egg like this, that's perfectly fine. For this dish, I think I'm going to use a cutter to cut it about the same size as the steak, just for a nice sleek look. Okay, now it's time to start plating. We're just going to remove the twine from the steak. Also spooning on a tiny bit of brown butter from the pan, and I'm putting that slice of herb butter on the top. I'm just going to torch it a little bit so it starts melting. And we're going to put our perfectly cooked egg on top of everything. We're going to garnish with a thick slice of truffle and some chives. Next, we're going to put some ground black pepper and get our salad ready. It's just a simple green salad with some radishes and some shallots. We're just going to build this salad inside our steak. The steak and eggs and flavored butter are so rich on their own, they don't really need anything else but a salad. Okay, the moment of truth. Let's cut into this. As you can see, the flavored butter has melted and covered the steak and made a nice little sauce. Oh, that's perfectly cooked. Look at that. Steak and eggs, fit for a king. Or queen, for that matter. Look at that. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you'd like to see further recipes and techniques, please like and subscribe. Happy cooking.